And according to Marketing Donut, 63% of buyers will not buy immediately. They actually take 3+ months to actually consider, educate themselves, build trust, and eventually buy. Unfortunately, the vast majority of agencies will not actually take the time to build that relationship and ultimately lose out on that potential revenue. And, the issue here, realistically speaking, is that the vast majority of agencies, the thing that they're constantly focused on is leads. How do I get more leads to have more sales to be able to get to where I want to be? And the opportunity here and the understanding is that there's a lot of money in a list. Building that list, educating that list, building a relationship with that list. There's a ton of money and value in there, but the vast majority of people miss out on it because they don't actually spend the time to market to them. So the thing that I wanted to go through here is that how you can actually go about doing this and thinking about it in the appropriate fashion. So unfortunately, like I said, the vast majority of people will not actually reach out. And I want you to think about when you consider buying something. There are people that are problem aware, but not solution aware. And so they're looking for the answer to a problem. And that might be how they come across your site or your lead magnet or your content. But ultimately speaking, they're not ready to buy yet. They're just looking at becoming aware of their problem in the first place. And so you have to actually have them understand the solution. And so that, typically speaking, not always, but typically speaking, is the distinction between a now buyer versus a later buyer, is someone that is solution aware versus non-solution aware. And 80% of agencies are not actually following up with the later buyers. And so quite frankly, if you are doing, even if you're doing bad follow-up and you're staying connected with them in the not a truly effective way, you're actually ahead of your competition because they're not doing any of it. And so I want to remove that like fear of how do I go about doing it? How do I do it? And why am I doing it? And what if I do it wrong? Is that realistically speaking, you're better off doing it and then figuring it out and learning it than not doing it at all. This idea around perfection in marketing for the vast majority of agencies is a huge blocker for you to actually making that movement. And it's extremely important that you make the decision that you want to actually be able to capitalize on this and being able to grow your business and actually filter your decision making, not through fear, but ultimate goal. And that decision making is so incredibly important as actually the catalyst and the difference between a successful business and one that isn't, a successful agency and one that stagnates or is on a treadmill and not being able to actually grow. So I want you to now, in this conversation right now, make the decision of whether you actually want to be ahead of the competition or not. And if you do, actually start looking at how do you actually build a list and actually stay in front of the later buyers, continue to educate them, provide them with value, and make them more solution aware and ultimately about your solution. One of the primary blockers here is, I don't want to be harassing my prospects. And realistically speaking, you don't actually have to be harassing. And many people think about marketing as harassment. And where I believe and I see a lot of agencies actually go wrong here is they're trying to go to the sale so quickly. They're just like in the person's face and saying, hey, buy now, buy now, buy now, buy now. Hey, I'm here. Let's have a conversation. Rather than recognizing that if they're not actually clicking on it, they're not ready for that. And knowing that and understanding that. I'm not saying that you can't actually push them to a call and, maybe even doing some appointment setting things like we do. But actually understanding that you, as long as you're not trying to push them every single conversation that you have with them to a call, that's not educating them. That's not providing them with value. That's not actually nurturing them. That's just pushing them, which ultimately speaking, when someone's pushed, what do they want to do? They want to fight back. You're creating friction even. So I want you to actually truly think about this, right? And how do you actually look at that follow-up? What is the goal for you in that sequence? Understand list segmentation and ideally speaking, utilizing a CRM to actually have that list segmentation of where have they gone, what are they doing, what have they interacted with, and being able to actually follow up with them in appropriate times. And as you grow the data, you'll be able to make more informed decisions. The other item that I want to talk about, and there's a sort of a bit of a fine line here. There is reaching out so frequently where you're going to push them to say no. But there's also the fear of them saying no. And I've got a very firm opinion of the idea of them saying no is that if they're not and they don't want to buy and it's not something that they're interested in, getting a no sooner is actually a better thing. You know who doesn't want to work with you. You're not meant to work with everyone. You don't want to work with everyone, and that's okay. And the sooner that you get to that know that they're not a true potential prospect and someone that doesn't want to buy from you is fine. We are so afraid of the idea that someone is going to tell us no and that it's rejection of us and that it actually affects our opinion of ourselves rather than actually giving us the opportunity to work with the people that we're meant to work with. And I think this is so incredibly important, and something that is really truly fraught in this industry is the fear of marketing, is the fear of business development. There's one of the things that I heard in the early part of my career in agencies was that we have to be used to being told no. And the reason that this was being said was in a sales conversation, which I think realistically speaking isn't exactly true in my opinion now. But I do agree with the idea of being used to being told no. And the vast majority of the time should be done in marketing. Yeah, not interested. That's totally okay. And I'm not offended by it. I'm not bothered by it. Unsubscribe and move on. I wasn't meant to work with that person. I wasn't going to help them. And the way that I communicate my ideals, the way that I look at business growth is different to them. And I'm okay being different. I'm okay being unique, and I'm okay not being for everyone. And you should be too, because you're not. And when you try to be for everyone is when ultimately the vast majority of agencies fail, as you've heard me talk about time and time and time again. It's not about being the everything to everyone, but actually being the thing that you ultimately want to be to your right ideal client, the one that you can help, the one that you can serve, the one that you can provide results for. But getting to that no earlier is better. It stops you from wasting time and theirs. So don't be afraid of the no. Lean into it. Look to get the answer. Do they have interest or not? And it's okay to directly ask the question as well. There is the distinction, right? And you can push people to say no if you are actually harassing them and emailing them just 4 or 5 times a week that is not providing them with value and you're just asking them to buy. That will likely push someone to say no. But do not do it. If you're not doing it in that way, I think that you're fine. And it's actually getting a no is totally okay. And understanding that distinction and when you're actually crossing that line. But ultimately speaking, you do need to follow up. You do need to engage. You do need to educate. And you do need to provide value to build trust with that lead, with that prospect. And if you're not, you're actually doing your agency and your future growth a disservice. So if you are not and do not have a current nurture sequence for the people that are on your list, or you have a list that you haven't emailed in a very long time, my suggestion is start today. It could be a simple email. Write out a problem that you had. And I would say that one of the number ones, like, what do I say? You talk to your clients every day. What problem are they solving? What problem were you solving for them, I should say? Talk about it. Do you have content that you create every single day? Every single day. It's not as hard as you think. If you have any questions about how you should reach out, what you should be talking about, and the frequency by which you should be reaching out, please do comment below. Happy to provide any insight that I can. And if you would like, feel free to also DM us. We're happy to schedule a chat and give you a couple of things that you can be doing in the immediate to allow for you to be able to capitalize on that list that you have built and those later buyers. All right, everybody. Hope you are able to gain some insight into how you have a ton of value and future revenue in your list and the distinction between the now buyer versus the later buyer.